Hello, this is Brett Knowles. This video is a recap of the three key things which I think have occurred within the Balanced Scorecard arena in the last 5 or 10 years. I've called this Balanced Scorecard 5.0, but to be honest with you, I am not completely sure what version of the scorecard we're in. The scorecard has captivated innovation and ideas from thought leaders and consultants from around the world, and it has continually evolved since it began. The ideas here are my own and are based on our experience that we've gleaned over the last 5 or 10 years implementing scorecards at a couple of thousand organizations, literally in every sector and around the world. So first, a quick primer on what is the Balanced Scorecard, and I'll tell the story that's been told a gazillion times before, which is the work that we did with Southwest Airlines starting back in the late 90s. And of course, there are no state secrets. This story has been told many, many times from scorecard practitioners and also has been captured in about 23 different books that describe different aspects of the work that we did. The general idea is this: the Balanced Scorecard allows us to have a broader view of the organization's performance, looking beyond just the financials. And in fact, our early research indicated there's sort of 4 buckets of knowledge we needed about an organization to measure its performance. Financial, how are we doing financially? Internal, what are internal operations, how are they performing? Customers, what do our customers want and how are we meeting those needs? And learning and growth. Now, at the time, we're working with Peter Senge at MIT, and that was intended to be organizational learning and organizational growth, not just people. Anyways, we started off with this icon, almost like a navigator compass with these 4 perspectives on it. We eventually found there's a cause and effect relationship. So in the private sector, our goal is to achieve financial success. To do that, we have to meet our customer needs. To meet our customer needs, we need the right internal processes. And to build and maintain those processes, we need the right corporate competencies, capacity, strategic assets, what we now call enablers, so people don't get confused with just people. And the strategy map tries to draw the cause and effect relationship between the strategic objectives. So in the case of Southwest, the common story is how do we, the first question is how to drive operating efficiency, and in their case, it's increase revenue, or in their case, more revenue by more customers and optimize use of assets or fewer planes. How do we get there? Well, our customers are looking for 2 key things: on-time arrivals and low ticket price. And the theory is if we can achieve those 3 objectives, we'll become successful. How do we achieve them? In their case, it's all about an operational excellence strategy and getting the airplane up in the air for as much time as possible, or reducing turnaround time. And how do we make that happen? Focus on redesign with a process towards cycle time reduction. So that's a strategy map. It outlines our key strategic goals. And of course, strategy is all about prioritization. So leadership has to weight these objectives, and they get prioritized over time. Rather, the priorities shift over time based on our gains and losses in the market, changes, and so forth. And then finally, we should be able to put leading and lagging indicators next to each of these objectives. So eventually we can produce something like this, a balanced scorecard. So enough in the primer. What's happened recently? Well, I think there are 3 major things that have allowed us to leap forward. One is our organizations are forced to live with shorter time frames. As we see it, the 1-year plan is the new 5-year plan. In other words, the uncertainty that we used to have 5 years out, we now have 1 year out. And so we need to be more agile in how we perform. Secondly, we've figured out through the abundance of data and what we think of as big data as an ability to cascade the scorecards from the company to the department to teams now down to the individual. And that does a whole bunch of magical things, the most significant of which, seen by many of our clients, is replacing that annual painful performance review with more frequent, less formal performance conversations, driven by the employee, not the organization. And then the third thing is about including a true bottom line. We now understand it's important that we absolutely include our environmental impact and our impact on society as we measure the performance of our organizations. So let's start at the beginning, shorter time frames. The idea here is, as we've always known, the corporate mission gets cascaded down to strategic goals, objectives, and tasks and tactics. And so we end up breaking that mission into specific annual goals, goal 1, goal 2, goal 3, and each of those gets broken down to what are we going to do each quarter. Objective 1, Objective 2, Objective 3. And each of those objectives we're going to break down to key results. How are we going to know if we've achieved those objectives? And then finally those go down to the specific activities we do, the processes and projects that we work in. Now, we can call these things anything that we want. This is the terminology we're going to use for this presentation. Now, that mission vision is, long-term, 5, 10, 20 years out. The annual strategic goals describe what do I need to do this year in aid of my objectives, say 5 years out. And then the quarterly one kind of says, what do I need to do this quarter in aid of achieving that 1-year goal, in aid of achieving the 5-year goal. And then, of course, those activities are what do I do today to help achieve this quarter's activities to achieve this year's and long term. Now, I would argue the scorecard initially, when we founded it, began working at this top level. And we have been working on cascading it down to chunks of the organization, but not so much chunks of time. But as our time compresses and we need more agile organizations, we need more and more focus on those quarterly activities. In fact, a recent trend has been called OKRs, Objectives and Key Results. Objectives and key results. The idea is we're taking that longer term and we're looking at shorter term objectives and what are those key results. Now, what's cool about this is it means as a manager, I can understand if I'm not achieving this objective in quarter 1, I can then understand that perhaps my strategy is in jeopardy. So in quarter 2, I need to do something different. Or if I'm making better gains than I expected in quarter 1, I can aggressively pursue that longer term strategy. I don't pause and wait until Q2 or something. So the idea is time compression requires reporting compression, and we now have the capability of reporting and understanding at that finer tune level. So we're seeing this in many organizations. And we've seen quite a few organizations be successful at it. So Google has been the champion of OKRs for some time and have proven the ability to keep an organization agile and innovative in a very complex environment and through complex growth. We've helped significant corporations like IBM deliver OKRs as well, allowing large monstrous companies that weren't necessarily as agile to become more so, and allow them to compete effectively with smaller startups and new age companies. And we've helped many other organizations of various sizes get their hands around their strategy and breaking it down to quarterly objectives which individuals own and significantly improve the performance of the organization. Thing 2 about changes, cascading it down to the individual level. So the idea, of course, is this, that in businesses that require some element of cognitive capability, pay for performance doesn't work. Now, the best book to read on this is Daniel Pink's book, Drive, The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us. And he cites a lot of examples, and to me it all comes back to, the most addictive process of all, which is online gaming. Online gaming has understood what motivates us as individuals intrinsically, and they're so motivational, they're literally addictive. But it's just a process. The process of playing an online game, Tetris or Angry Birds, is no different than the process of processing a purchase order or an invoice. It's just a process that has an outcome, and some are bigger monsters than others. So what are those things that motivate us? Well, Daniel points out 3 intrinsic motivators. I think in business there's actually 5. Each individual needs to understand their purpose. What's my purpose in this organization? Mastery. I need the ability to get better at that activity and, of course, track my progress against getting better and my progress day on day. If I have those things, I can then operate by myself. I can be autonomous in my decision making, knowing that it's consistent with the organization's goals, but I can choose and prioritize what I do day to day. And thing 5, social interaction. We need the ability to talk about how we're performing. No different than if you're playing a game of football or a game of chess, how you talk about the strategy of the game as it's going on or afterwards with your teammates. And some of the highest interaction on the web comes around those people playing online gaming. So social interaction is important, yet somehow we've extracted that from businesses where we have these secret conversations between the boss and individual employees about performance issues. So if we can apply those principles to business, it becomes interesting. What if you're able to post a complex invoice, you'd earn more points? Or you get to level up if you've been processing this project for some time and it's been on schedule, on budget, on quality, you get to take on bigger projects and so on. So those same things which make online gaming interesting. So ultimately, we should be able to provide you as an employee a scorecard on how you've been doing. And, you could get as carried away as you wanted. You could, add in point systems, you could add in leaderboards, badges, alignment to corporate goals, and allows the individual to see how they're doing. And we've seen in organizations where we've implemented this significant improvements in employee engagement, customer satisfaction, and overall performance of the organization. Phenomenal results. Then finally, about sustainability. Now, a lot's happened that we now understand that, first off, the issues of environment and society are becoming more and more prevalent to all of us. And we understand that governments can't solve these problems by themselves. In fact, it's arguable that businesses can make a bigger impact faster. And so let's take a look at what that looks like. We all know the triple bottom line, the idea that a company needs to measure its performance, but also be aware of its impact on environment and society. The best example I heard is someone describe this as saying, what if we thought of these as 3 bank accounts, and there's a fixed amount of money across all 3. And what we've been doing historically is taking money out of the environment bank account so that we can recognize it as revenue or profitability in the company. And we've been taking money out of the society bank account so we can recognize it as company. And so this looks like, some of the bad stories we've heard about third world companies not paying very well, not providing the right benefits for their employees, not providing safe work environments. So if we think of these as 3 accounts, we're never creating more wealth. We're just shifting wealth from one account to another. And the right thing for us businesses to do is to, in fact, take a look at all 3 accounts and try to figure out what is the right break even across these 3. So it might look a bit more like this, where, instead of being 3 overlapping circles of Venn diagram, they're 3 nested circles where the company lives inside society, and society lives inside the environment. And society itself is made up of our suppliers and our customers and the communities that we live and work in. So we end up with sort of 3 nested circles where they impact each other. So for example, the company draws resources both from the environment and society to create their product. And then we create products that get spat out in society and waste that gets spat out in society and the environment. Then thirdly, there's an impact just by the fact that we exist, an operational presence that impacts all 3 things. So a lot of work's been done on this. In fact, Sweden and other areas in Europe, there's been about 30 years of research that has identified basically 4 broad pockets of areas that we can measure. On the environment, we're kind of looking at a business's ability to eliminate its contribution to 3 things. 1, the pollution from mined substances. 2, the pollution caused from substances that we produce. And then thirdly, the environmental degradation that happens by physical means as we mine for oil or for gas or for minerals. Then on society, we also need to ensure that we work hard to make sure that people, our suppliers and their communities, our customers, their communities, where our plants are in their communities, those people are not subjected to conditions that undermine their capacity to meet their own needs. So these 4 principles have been built out into literally 21 business goals that have been scientifically proven. And you can read more about these at the Future Fit Business Benchmark. So things like that last category about employees really break into, for example, 5 subcategories: that we safeguard our employees' health, that we pay at least a living wage, that we give them fair employment terms, they're not subject to discrimination, and then finally, that employees' concerns are dealt with. So we're taking those broad concepts, and now we've got specific measures that we can use consistently across organizations and actually create a benchmark. And so if we include that with the financials, and there's many organizations worrying about how do we recognize the financial aspect, SASB being part of that, we should ultimately be able to come up with a scorecard that gives us those hard measures and clear visibility on how any organization is performing against all three bottom lines, or in fact what we're now calling the three top lines. So, in summary, we've had three major leaps forward. 1, shorter time frames. 2, individual scorecards are now the thing. And 3, recognizing that we need to include sustainability as part of how we report our business's performance. And all of those get consolidated into this one view. Let's call it the Sustainability Scorecard, or Balanced Scorecard 5.0, where every employee, the lowest level in the organization, team, department, and business should know what they have done this day, this week, this month, this quarter, this year towards being sustainable. Wouldn't it be cool if you could go home and on your smartphone show your significant others what you've done this week to make the world a better place? And so ultimately, this we've discovered is not a big project for most organizations because you have the data, the frameworks already, and there's huge benefits. We're seeing Balanced Scorecard 5.0 building agility into organizations. It's reducing its risk and fines and penalties associated with bad performance and the reputational risk that's incurred by things like workforce problems. We're seeing significant increases in employee engagement and therefore reductions in turnover. We're seeing much more effective stakeholder communications and, of course, ultimately, performance gains. So I hope this has been interesting to you. It's been our attempt to give you a view of what's happened recently in the Balanced Scorecard 5.0. I urge you to listen to my other LinkedIn postings and YouTube videos to understand more details about each of these concepts.